Okay, good afternoon. I'm Lori Holeen, and I'd like to welcome everyone to Idaho State University to our Homeland Security and Emergency Management Leadership Insights webinar series. This particular one, we have placed this at a timeline where we have usually a live class for the graduate program, which is the class is Interdisciplinary Approaches to Homeland Security. On behalf of Idaho State University and our guest speaker, we want to thank you for joining us. This session is taking place right now. It is July 15th, 2024. So our participants, if you could just make sure that you keep your microphone muted unless we have you ask a question, which we will be opening it up for questions. So when we let you know if the time is right, we'll do that after our speaker has his opening remarks. You can also use the chat window if you would like to submit a question, and I can read it on your behalf if you'd like, but we do encourage you to interact with our speaker as well. So we will we'll get started now at that point. So I would like to, and Mike, if Mike Winegardener, if you could enable your camera so we can see and hear you. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker. Michael Winegardener is with Idaho National Laboratory. Mr. Winegardener is the emergency management trainer responsible for training 20 emergency management professionals and approximately 325 staff members at INL that assist with emergency response activities. He is a certified ICS instructor, a graduate of Federal Law Enforcement Training Center's Advanced Academy, and alumni of the Centers for Domestic Preparedness, and he has benchmarked some of the nation's top emergency operations centers. Earlier in his career, he was a risk analyst for Levi Strauss Co in Oregon and was a private defense contractor in San Diego, working with the State Department and Departments of Homeland Security, working to disrupt drug and human trafficking through covert surveillance technologies. Prior to working for INL, he worked for Idaho Health and Welfare, both pre and post-COVID, as an emergency preparedness planner. So thank you very much for joining us today, Mike. It's great to have you here.
Of course, thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, I know you have some slides with some information so we can get an overview. So we'll go ahead and turn that over to you and have you share your screen now.
Great, appreciate it. Stand by.
Yeah.
All right, is that visible?
Yes, looks good.
Perfect. So again, I Mike Winegardener. I work as a trainer for emergency management at Idaho National Labs. For those of you who are not from Eastern Idaho, you may not be familiar with the lab. In fact, if you are from Eastern Idaho, you may be familiar with the lab, but not know everything that the lab is involved with or the special programs that we have going on here. So to begin us, let's get an overview of kind of how diverse emergency management is here at the lab. So we have our standard emergency management program, which is a FEMA-based, all hazards-based risk planning preparedness division for handling emergencies here at Idaho National Lab for the Department of Energy. Also part of our program is the continuity of operations. And continuity of operations is mission essential functions to support the government and its essential functions in times of crisis. Most recently, we saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic and how the continuity of operations worked here at INL to maintain a level of work and sustain the continuity of our programs throughout the pandemic. And finally, part of our program is the Radiological Assistance Program. The Radiological Assistance Program is the nation's premier resource for finding, tracking, and helping to collect radiological hazards all around the country and even the globe if needed, if there is a nuclear-based or radiological-based incident. So that's our program, and already you start to see the diversity and broadness of scope that emergency management has here at Idaho National Labs. Some of our capabilities: first, we provide an all hazards risk-based program to help prepare, mitigate, respond to, and recover from operational emergencies. Because of the lab's diverse nature, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about our programs, we have to be prepared for any number of very, very specific, unique hazards for the lab, and also hazards that you would typically see from a county or a city. So, and everything from a nuclear response or a radiological response down to severe weather incidents, wildfire, loss of power. Being here at the lab also provides us access to some of the world's most premier technical experts for guidance and training of other federal entities within the DOE complex, within the Department of Energy complex, and outside federal, local, and state agencies. And we are happy to provide this type of assistance, technical expertise, and capabilities to help our partner agencies with very unique situations, problems, and emergencies. A lot of what we do is interfacing with any number of federal, local, state, tribal entities because of the unique nature and footprint of the Idaho National Labs. The Idaho National Labs consists of a variety of partners and agencies that are located on 890 square miles of eastern Idaho. 890 square miles with 5 unique facilities specific to our program and other facilities that we help with in times of emergencies. So we have nuclear reactors, we have naval fuel rods for our nuclear fleet, we have Department of Defense, we've got any number of special projects ranging from drones, internets, and other capabilities that are very specific and lend themselves to being tested, proved, and tried in an area that's very isolated and very capable. We're also surrounded by counties and municipalities. Some of our more unique hazards have an impact radius or zone that extends past INL boundaries and could potentially impact counties, cities, and private citizens outside of our 890 square mile physical footprint. As you can imagine, this type of hazard impact, we have to be experts in maintaining relationships across disciplines and agencies. And we're talking anything from power management and where power comes and goes to infrastructures in cities and municipalities. We have state highways that run through our property that we coordinate with state and local agencies on. And of course, we have federal and state entities like the EPA, like the Department of Energy. And all of this coordination and relationships across discipline is something that we foster every single day for our worst day. Talking about our professional staff as well as those non-emergency management staff that assist us in our response to emergencies. Our emergency response organization consists of approximately 325 non-emergency management staff and approximately 20 emergency management staff that are full-time. We base all of our operations and responses, preparation, mitigation, recovery in ICS, Incident Command System, and a NIMS, our National Incident Management System. So between these programs, we have our foundation of how we respond, adapt, and are flexible to our all hazards approach. That being said, the nature of what we do here at the lab and the hazards that we have, as well as operating between federal, state, and local entities, has allowed us to create a hybrid of sorts with the ICS kind of FEMA-based structures and systems, and find a system and a structure that works for Idaho National Lab and the Department of Energy on how to respond to recover from emergencies. We have 4 emergency control centers, and this is something that you can think of as an area command based, where we have not incident command posts, but decision-making authorities based in each one of the facilities. Because the facilities are so unique in nature and the hazards that they present are so unique, each one of the facilities has an emergency control center. And we have one emergency operations center that's based in Idaho Falls. And this emergency operations center functions much like the traditional FEMA resource acquisition administrative head of an emergency. It works very much like a traditional FEMA center. Talking a little bit about our projects and hazards that we have in Eastern Idaho. Of course, we have our nuclear research. We have nuclear reactors that are functional, that are testing different types of materials on how they respond to the atmosphere and the unique situations created by nuclear reactors. We also have projects like our small nuclear reactors or small modular reactors that the nation is being very focused on. How do we create a small footprint and a constant power source? We have plans to build a hydrogen plant on the site. We have facilities to build batteries for our space programs and our space rovers, electric vehicle testing centers for batteries and charging. We have our cybersecurity division and all of the threats that they deal with, along with research capabilities, Homeland Security as is traditionally seen, Department of Defense and their various programs, as well as I mentioned before, our standard suite package of what someone may see in a city, in a county, as wildfire, winter storms, power outages, etc. So with that being said, that's kind of a great overview of where we are right now as a program and as a lab, our unique hazards and our general approach to them. What I would really love to do is get a little bit of question and answers going, and I can help fill in some of these gaps.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mike. Definitely appreciate getting kind of the lay of the land. And I think you did a great job of helping us understand some of those unique elements that fall under the category of what you do there at INL, although I'm sure that's just barely skimming across the surface of some of those complexities. Just as a note for our students, if you have any questions, go ahead and you can either chat them into the chat window, or you can just use the indicator to raise your hand, and I'll just call on you and let you ask your questions. But I do have a few other questions, and even a few that popped into my head as Mike, you were sharing a few more of the details. So I want this just to be conversational for us, and feel free to add and ad lib in there as we need. First thing that I was curious about, and thank you for talking about so many of the different connection points that you have, especially for an actual incident, like when you have ramped up your emergency operations center. One of the questions I have, because in my background, I've worked at local EOC environments, I've worked at state level ones, and I worked at FEMA headquarters in their National Response and Coordination Center. And so one of the first things I wondered was, how do you go about sharing information when you're actually activated? Do you guys use web EOC? Do you use incident management software? Do you provide situational reports? What does that coordination look like?
Yeah, great question, because it varies from place to place. And we found that even in the EOCs that we benchmarked that may be more traditionally kind of FEMA focused, Homeland Security focused, web EOC is the primary source that we use, and we found that that's kind of nationwide. It's a standard for the nation to share information. That being said, we have internal software that we use as well to share notifications with our stakeholders and provide information that way. Then you have to take a look at kind of the standard FEMA forms, you know, the 201s, the 203s, the 214s, and all of those very specific roles that those forms create. We roll those into our own package of forms, and those are generally filled out and sent along with web EOC or our notification software to our stakeholders. So it's a little bit of all of the above.
And so you're so large. You talked about how many square miles you guys cover. Is your connection point, if you are providing like a situation or a briefing document or any of those forms that you're talking about, do you roll them into the state, or do you roll them to your local counties that surround the area if it's a more isolated incident? How do you decide where you connect and share that information or those reports?
Yeah, that's one of the primary advantages of building solid relationships with stakeholders, because it really is so different depending on the nature of the emergency. There are some emergencies where all of our stakeholders will know what's going on at INL. If it's an INL emergency and it happens on our property, we are the figurehead for that information. We're the resource, we're the experts, but we really try and take into account the nature of the emergency and who will want to, need to, have to know about the details of that emergency. One thing that can happen is, and communication is it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's a really, really great thing, but we don't want to give information to partners that may not need that information and that may wind up confusing them in the process. Well, I've received this information, so maybe this pertains to me and I need to do something about it. Well, we want to be as transparent as we can, but we really want to be careful with what we share and the nature of what we share in the emergency to specific stakeholders.
Okay, so can we unpack that a little bit?
Of course.
Is that, so do you wait until you receive a question or a request for information and then you determine the need for that? Or how do you make those determinations of a need to know if you're trying to prepare some type of information flow one way or the other?
Yeah, so there's two parts of that. There's kind of our regulatory drivers. And a regulatory driver is, we have standard processes and procedures, requirements based on the Department of Energy that we need to notify X number of shareholders within 15 to 30 minutes of classification of an emergency. So we understand that there's an emergency, and we start to understand and identify what that emergency is. And that process starts a number of time requirement clocks for us that are all based in DOE requirements and procedures. The other side of that is the social media or the media aspect, and how are we informing our citizens, our partners in the community, of what's going on here. And that typically travels through our public information room, through our Joint Information Center, and all of that is approved by our emergency director, which could be considered the incident commander on a typical FEMA-based response.
Okay, great. I imagine that the type of incidents that you would be involved in require a lot of coordination across INL and with other disciplines, other agencies, organizations, multiple layers of government. Do you have any personal anecdotes or related to responding and managing emergencies on behalf of that kind of complex environment?
Yeah. So fortunately, we don't have many emergencies on INL property at INL. That's great. Fantastic news. I think I would start with something that people are more familiar with, which is the COVID-19 pandemic and what it was like to work in the health department prior to, and then during and post COVID-19. As a planner for the state of Idaho, one of my primary responsibilities was the pandemic plan, to make sure that our partners understood the plan, that we had practiced the plan, that we had MOUs or memorandums of understanding with our partners, so they would know at what point we interface and at what point they take over or we take over and step in. So for COVID-19, we had local plans, we had state plans, and we had some federal plans to respond to this type of incident with a national pandemic. Obviously, that becomes very, very complicated when you talk about all of the entities involved, a fast-moving, very dynamic virus, and talking with agencies, both federal and local, state agencies that have expertise in certain subject matters. When we write a plan or we go to attack an emergency and respond to it, we rely on all of the coordination we've done prior to the onset of the emergency. What we discover is that during the emergency, gaps can form in our understanding, gaps can form in our communication and in our relationships. We recognize partners that we should have had that we did not have. And these information centers of partners that we didn't know existed. So there's a lot of crossing boundaries for disciplines and agencies to collect information, very specific information from subject matter experts. And how do we apply that to a local, to a county, to a state that's going through different levels of trauma, different levels of emergency, and in fact, different regulatory environments. So here in Idaho, county commissioners play a big part in how the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare operate within the county. So just having a state mandate isn't going to do it. You've got to have cooperation and coordination with county resources that will open the door for being able to, in this case, administer vaccine within the county, within the municipality, get the sheriff on board. So it can be very, very dynamic in a situation that previously you thought that you had it all sorted out because you'd practiced it, you drilled it, you'd exercised it, and then all of a sudden the plan basically evaporates because real world incidents are not like you planned them.
Yeah, that's so true. From my career in emergency management, we had lots of pandemic style plans. There was H1N1, there was even West Nile virus, there was concerns about hoof and mouth disease or the swine flu. I mean, we've had all sorts of different bouts. And of course, then Ebola came around, but then you had this really fast moving COVID-19 that really all of the plans of social distancing and things like that really were magnified on such a global scale because it wasn't even just in the US. So yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective of working in that healthcare environment where they really had to be looking at the policy level components right away. So to pull this back to our particular class topic that we're looking at right now of interdisciplinary approaches, it's one thing to be looking at something through the lens of a planning lens when you're wanting to get the right partners to the table. How do you know when you've achieved all of the perspectives that are going to be so important when you're sitting down to write those plans, knowing that the plans may only hit 50% of the actual problem when it actually occurs? But, is there, do you have any lessons learned from looking at COVID of where those gaps were, where maybe some of those disciplines were not brought in at the right time, and maybe, with hindsight and 2020, you would have maybe brought them in sooner?
Yeah. I think if you could figure out that question, that's the $1 million question, right? Is who is to be involved right off the bat, and a complete list of those individuals. I will say that as COVID progressed, we recognized the need for very specific information. And we didn't know that there were resource centers out there, either in the private sector or in the public sector, that had the type of information that we needed, but didn't know we needed until COVID started to progress. I think it's very difficult to forecast the need of that very specific information. But I will say, as a broader topic, when you've come to a point in the planning that you feel like you've involved every stakeholder that you can to address every situation, you're probably only halfway there. There are so many resources that specialize in very, very, very specialized information that you won't know until you need them. And one of the ways that we found we could discover these pockets of information was through the relationships that we had built prior to. So exercises and drilling, they're great for practicing the plan, but they also serve a more broad purpose in identifying partners that you can work with, that when something happens, you can talk to them and you can share information with them. You've built trust with them. And when you come to the group with questions, they can provide you with avenues that you've previously not explored.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about building trust, because sometimes even having a trusted partner that you can say, hey, we brought these two groups in this discipline, but who else, even asking another discipline what other perspectives are missing from the table. I think that as complex as some of the problems that we do face within the Homeland Security environment can be so complex, it's not that we can't figure out how to approach them, but we just need new voices at the table. We need to expand that table so that we can have more perspectives help us kind of figure out what we might not be seeing that can help us have a more complete perspective of that. Okay, so those are great. I'm gonna pause for a minute and see, do we have any questions? Would anybody like to jump in and ask a question of Mike while we have him here as our guest? I see Dallin. Dallin, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. Thank you.
I guess you can always count on my big mouth piping in here. Hey, Mike, man, I sure appreciate you taking some time and chatting with us tonight. This has been super good. So I live in Blackfoot, little more local than Dan, who's clear on the other side of the country. Kind of got both ends of the spectrum here, but for me in particular, being interested in future employment opportunities with the INL, what I'm finding, it's just a little difficult to even know where to set your sights out there, because it's just such a huge organization, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of acronyms. It's kind of hard to get an appreciation for that. And then two, I see a lot of INL jobs post up on like LinkedIn and Indeed and some of these, and you see that there'll be a job and there's like 400 applicants.
Yeah.
How, I guess, what advice do you have for us to maybe, kind of, how do I make myself stand out in a sea of 400 other people like me?
Yeah. Great question. And it's a very relevant question now, because we're on the precipice of growing our program. And one of the things that we're looking for as candidates are those who are, for one, involved in the emergency management, national security, homeland security world. So they at least have a concept of what it is like on a day-to-day, what does FEMA look like? What does the ICS and NIMS look like? What does it look like for an individual to be involved in different types of either search and rescue, volunteer firefighter, law enforcement, all of those. And even if they're not volunteers, being familiar with that world, I'm sure it doesn't surprise you how rare it is to find someone who actually has an inkling of what emergency management, Homeland Security actually is, and then has taken some steps like, look, your ICS stuff, 100, 200, 700, 800. I mean, those alone set you apart from 90%. The other half of this equation is building relationships as we reach out to our partners like Lori here, and we have some face-to-face time, and we have an opportunity to communicate. You'll have my contact information, I'll have yours. We have internship opportunities. We have opportunities where we interface in different types of safety fairs and other things with the community, where you'll have an opportunity to build relationships with us. All of these things will set you apart from 90% of the other candidates. And I'll put this last little plug in. The understanding that emergency management is not, or Homeland Security, the education that we get on a college level, bachelor's, master's, whatever, that's the tip of the iceberg. That gets us started. Realize that and be open to the evolution of what your concept of emergency management, Homeland Security is in the field. The last plug-in, the state of Idaho has an incident response team, and they're based out of Boise. One of the contacts for that, Dave Hanneman, used to be the kind of like the IC for that group. He may still be, I'm not sure, but reaching out to that group, and even without deployed experience, you may be able to get a spot in one of their deployments, either in a planning group or in the EOC or the state's response center, something like that, that will get you those little bits of experience.
Dave's one of our faculty members here.
Perfect.
So a
Yeah,
lot of us know
Dave.
Dave. Super good dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad you mentioned that. Yeah, keep going, Dallin.
Yeah, certainly, or Dan or Dave or any of these guys, Nick, if you guys have got questions, don't let me dominate the discussion here tonight. But you did mention continuity of operations planning and kind of redundancy planning, and that's an area that I've really taken an interest in and had a little bit of professional experience in my background. I actually interviewed, excuse me, for the INL, a continuity of operations specialist in their IT department. And that was just a tremendously positive experience there. I don't know that they've made any big decisions there yet, but the gal that was kind of heading up the interview made the comment that continuity of operations is something that a lot of the departments at the INL have kind of been given a directive to I don't know, place a little higher on their priority list, or she seemed to indicate that there would be other jobs coming down in other areas of the INL related to that. Do you have any context there, or any information about that, or what that process might kind of look like?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to future opportunities within the continuity of operations, either program or wider vision for Idaho National Labs. I can say that now is an excellent time to be interested in that type of thing and to keep your ear to the ground and stay on INL's career page looking for that kind of thing.
And then I would say, you know, for Idaho National Labs, if you do have job opportunities, you can always run those through me, and we're happy to share that out with our current students as well as our alumni who have graduated from our programs. So I can always be a conduit to help share information like that out.
Yeah, and Lori, if I could, that's a great segue to something that I've been thinking about a lot. The exposure to your students is extremely valuable for us because it gives us access to individuals who are interested and have taken steps to show their interest in our discipline. And it's amazing. It's amazing that we cannot find, or we've had difficult finding, the right people who understand from the ground level how to move forward, and there's not an intensive training program involved with that. Targeted individuals, growing the expertise in the program, growing our discipline level. It's just, for us, this is a great opportunity to interact with your students.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. We do have a question that Dan has submitted. Dan, I'm just going to give you the opportunity. Would you like to ask your question directly? And I encourage everybody to turn their cameras on. It makes it a little more personal. There he is. If we can see each other and make this a little more discussion based. So Dan, go ahead if you'd like to share your question with Mike.
So I'm currently an emergency management specialist with the FEMA here in New York in Region 2. One thing I noticed that we do applicant closeouts and just helping people in general. They have limited resources with technology. Still finding people with still 2024, but in the US they don't have technology such as limited internet access or slow computers and outdated cell phones or no phones at all. So I was curious if you have any updates or anything in your opinions that might be moving forward with, like faster response times in disasters.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very large focus for us. Not only for our surrounding communities, but really because our internal footprint is 890 square miles. A disruption in cell service, although we have priority service, we have sat phones, we've got multiple redundancies in communication. For the broader range of communication, we're looking at mesh networks. We're looking at how can we plug and play as well as augment. So Starlink is part of our world. These different technologies around communication, again, that's just part of it. We're exploring opportunities for virtual based response on, let's not bring people into the EOC, for example, and whether that's some type of virtual reality, augmented reality, who knows, but these are types of things that we're looking at to help cut down response times. And of course, the back end of that is, as you mentioned, logistically, we've got to be able to support these individuals with communication capabilities when the world's not right. So mesh networks are a big part of that. And we'll be exploring more technology like that on how do we grow networks independently.
Thanks, that's helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned mesh networks as well, because certainly in Eastern Idaho, there's a lot of areas where reception is not really great. Connectivity can be spotty, and especially if you have large public venues where you have a lot of people, that can put a lot of stress and strain on what limited bandwidth we may have. Things like the state fair. Is there some discussion that are possibly going on about INL that might have some deeper pockets, a little more resources to assist with some of those areas that may have like a special event coming up, but that also could inadvertently run into some resource limitations?
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, I can't speak directly to what programs or projects that may be in the works, but we are firm advocates for our stakeholders, and we really, really want to make sure that they feel that we are a partner with them, and we will support them however we can to ensure that in times of stress, emergency, disaster, we have access, we have programs, we have resources available. We're part of this community, and we're part of the state of Idaho. We're part of the national and global web, but our staff for the large part comes from Eastern Idaho, and we want to make sure that the staff is safe, that the staff's families are safe and they're taken care of. And if there's an emergency, the staff can focus on their duties in an emergency and not be so concerned with their families and the family's well-being. So short answer, we're very interested in being a good community partner with our stakeholders.
That's great. Thank you. And I see David Harrington has joined us. And David, you're both an ISU incoming student as well as an INL employee, correct?
Yes,
I'm putting you on
I
the
am.
spot.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I
Can you hear me now?
can hear you. We just can't see you anymore.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I don't normally do this on my phone, so it's okay, I think we're good now. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, you're correct. Incoming ISU student, and INL. I work for the fire department. I've been with the INL fire department for about 10 years now.
Awesome. Well, great. Did you have a question or any contributions you'd like to add to our discussion?
No.
I scared him off. Okay, no worries. I didn't mean to put you on the
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
On the spot. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry.
There he is.
I shouldn't hit buttons. Yeah, no, no adders really. I was just looking to kind of plug in and start to see what this is all about. I'm excited to see some of my friends and colleagues on. It's always neat.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I did have a couple more questions, and anybody else can chime in here too, if you'd like. Mike, can you share a little bit more about how INL's emergency management and security teams are structured? Specifically, kind of curious to know, are the positions really highly specialized in a particular niche area, or would you say that people are more generalized in nature? Obviously, you mentioned about all hazards being an aspect of how you're structured and organized, but how do you see that playing out in the capabilities or that the actual employees who are team members have?
Yeah, I am an example of the generalist. I've done quite a few things that I never thought that would be part of my career path. And I would say most of our folks are like that. They have a variety of different backgrounds and experiences. And that speaks to being able to digest information from a variety of resources and interpret that information in the best way. We also have some folks who are very, very specialized subject matter experts. When it comes to the nature of the hazards we have here, those folks are really needed when it comes to understanding the nature of the emergency, the nature of the hazard. And I think we probably all have like salesman friends and engineer scientist type friends. The salesman and the engineer and scientist, they don't speak the same way. One of the benefits of being a generalist and having a broader exposure to career experience is the ability to interpret and communicate different aspects, disciplines across sub-disciplines, across people. And most of our folks are generalists. We have a very specific group that they're the scientists, they're the engineer type, and they are needed. Absolutely. We love them. Majority of the time, though, we look for folks who have a general background. There's this term that's been floating around for a long time: recognition prime decision making. Being a generalist allows you to fill your mind with experiences on a broader scope. So when you walk into a potentially new situation, an emergency, you have a large database to draw on to tell you what's been successful and what hasn't in past experiences. And that's one of the, from my perspective, that's one of the greatest benefits of being a generalist, is your database is full of different types of experiences. So when you're met with something new or something that's stressful or that may test you, at least you have some frame of reference to base decisions on.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. One of the things that our students are doing right now is they've just finished up reading the book Range by David Epstein, which is, the subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And it doesn't mean that you don't need specialists and those really super smart people with that subject matter expertise, but that there is value to having people who can basically be the conductors of the orchestra, to be able to figure out exactly when you need to lean and pull in those experts and then choreograph them in a way that will yield the result that you need. So thank you. That's great. I've got a question that floated in from Nicholas Van Kirk, and I know Dallin has another question. Nicholas, if you'd like, you can ask the question yourself, or I'm happy to convey it for Mike if you'd like me to.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks for taking the time, Mike. I'm actually on my way here shortly to my volunteer firefighter shift, but when you guys are hiring, like what volunteer work you look for with Red Cross or, volunteer law enforcement officer or firefighter? Like, what are you looking for in potential candidates? Like, what's advantageous for what you guys look for? I know you talked about ICS and the NIM system, and definitely the fire department works, pretty extensively with that. But what do you guys look for?
Yeah, I think to build on what I said previously, experience with closed loop, three-way communication, repeat backs, vetting information. If you're unfamiliar with those terms, become familiar with that. Become familiar with military phonetic alphabet and the 24-hour clock. If you can, and have exposure to potentially stressful situations, specifically where critical thinking is involved and an aspect of leadership, those are types of things that we look for. If we can ascertain that the candidate can critically think under pressure and stress, that goes a long way in our evaluation process, because as we all know, we're not under emergency conditions all of the time. We stay in this stasis of prepare and mitigate, and then maybe today, maybe next year, there will be some emergency that will drive stress levels up and through the roof. And if we don't know how our colleagues are going to react under stress, then we're probably less likely to trust them in those types of stressful environments where we need to make decisions quickly, critically think. And that's kind of a long answer, but can I give you any more information? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, for sure, Mike. I'm a 22-year service member, so I have a career built on being stressed out. But no, I think that's good. And I agree with you. And just in terms of leadership skills and being able to trust the men and women to your left or right that can be dependent upon on stressful environments and how they react, and people who don't shut down but expand and move forward. But no, I appreciate that. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Great. I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask other questions. I still have a couple in the queue as well, but I know, Dallin, you mentioned that you have another question, so go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, Matt, I feel like I could keep you busy all night. I'm sure at some point, you got to go back to your family. We appreciate you taking the time. I guess I'm a little over halfway through the program, or maybe even towards the tail end of things here, just kind of in the throes of my big capstone project. We've been fortunate to have exposure to a lot of different disciplines from our faculty members. They come from just a tremendous variety of experiences. So it's been cool to see the different aspects and focuses within Homeland Security, emergency management, the bigger umbrella there. I'm finding it a bit like drinking from a fire hose when I start looking at different subspecialties and different focus areas. There's just so many to choose from. Even more so, I'm getting all these like emails and things from different things like, set yourself apart by getting this certification. Mm-hmm. It only costs $500. And I have to assume that some of those are maybe a little predatory in that they're just looking to get $500 and you get a certification that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Are there specific certifications that you feel like the industry values or maybe the INL specifically looks at? I know, the certified emergency manager, the associate emergency manager, and then there's technology ones and continuity ones. And whatever input you have there, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are, I think, International Association of Emergency Managers, that's one of the legit organizations. And to be involved in their program and attend maybe some webinars and pursue some accredit or some certification from that organization, that's a really good kind of emergency management based program. Another one that's offered nationally, and it comes locally as well, HSEEP, or exercise planning. Exercise planning is a great way to critically think your way through emergencies in a very safe, no failure environment. You could open up the catalog to Centers for Domestic Preparedness, Emergency Management Institute. The issue is with some of these that we really focus on, with some of these certifications that we really focus on, you'll need a sponsor, and to be sponsored, you kind of have to be either like an intern, part-time, or full-time employee with the organization. And I realize that's a catch-22. You got to get in before you get the certification. But if I was on the outside looking in, FEMA offers great courses that are available to almost everybody. And FEMA is a good place to start. Beyond the 100, 200, NIMS 7, 8, you get into the basic emergency management certification academy, if you will. And then for Homeland's kind of a different animal. They're really more protective of their knowledge and training. And when you look at Homeland stuff, you're really kind of looking in areas where you need sponsorship to get in.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to kind of dovetail on that, FEMA has a professional development series of courses that if you take the whole series of certifications, then you get that credential of the professional development series. So I can share information with our class about that particular option that's available. And yeah, I think you brought up a great point, Mike, and particularly on the security side. There's lots of courses that are out there that require either a clearance or that you have to have an agency that will sponsor you because seats are limited. A lot of times those particular courses, those training courses, are in person and they only have certain number of spaces for them. But other times they may not fill up their spaces. And so I have on occasion had opportunities to share that with students if, say, the Idaho Office of Emergency Management might be hosting a training session, and if they have openings available, I can pass those on. Also, it's great to volunteer to be involved in an exercise. You can be an observer or a reporter where you can actually take information and scribe and provide your assessment, and then you get to go to the after action reviews. And those are also great networking opportunities where you get to meet a lot of people as well. So keeping your ears open to those opportunities are, I think, great.
And Lori, I'll add on to that. We have local, I guess, emergency fairs, for lack of a better word. Regional Readiness Rendezvous is one of those that INL attends, along with a lot of different state and local partners. And it's a great way to connect with us, with other entities, and like Lori said, to participate potentially in a drill or an exercise, become a known entity, one that we can reach out to if we need, even if we needed victims and we're going to moulage and all that kind of stuff. Every little bit helps. Every little bit of exposure to the program, especially ours. And this sounds like I'm tooting my own horn because I am a little bit, but INL is so unique. Not only are we located in nowhere eastern Idaho, we are the crown jewel of nuclear research in the United States and maybe the world. We are home to some of the only assets in the world that do what we do, and the variety that we have access to is bar none. I mean, you're not going to a county to fill out FEMA forms for reimbursements on floods or livestock fences. These are national programs that have worldwide implications. It's a fantastic place. Sorry, Lori, I just had to put that plug in there.
Don't apologize. That's great. You know, a lot of my career took place in the city of Seattle, and I worked quite heavily with Pacific Northwest National Labs. So the national labs in general, and so even for Dan, who's out in New York, or any of our other students that might not be in Idaho, national labs are excellent resources, and oftentimes they've got, well, they always have federal backing for their funding levels. So that provides a lot of great structure and resources to be able to devote towards developing these really unique skill sets and capabilities that are kind of those top level hazards that have that high consequence if there were to be something that would happen. But they're researchers as well, which again, you guys who have had me in the class know I'm a big fan of research, because we can't just sit on our laurels. We have to always ask ourselves, what can we do better? What isn't working exactly right? Let's not just always do things the same way we've always done things. We need innovation, and we need those people, and national labs are great partners. So if you've got a connection at a national lab, you know, run some ideas by them, you know, see what kind of research you might want to do that would have an impact with a national lab, or that a national lab might be able to back you on, or be able to you know, help collaborate. So just want to do another plug back in that direction as well. Well, we are already at the top of the hour. I guess I would like to see if there's any other questions that our attendees have that they would like to sneak one in under the wire. Okay, well, if not, I'd like to give Mike an opportunity to kind of share any closing thoughts or comments, anything else that you'd kind of like to share with our students.
Thanks, Lori. I've sprinkled it throughout, really setting yourself apart at Idaho National Lab. Experience is one of course, one of the things that we look at. We look at some certifications, FEMA stuff, easy to come by, readily accessible, and will set you apart. Like I said, even the ICS 100, 200, NIMS 700, 800, if you can get into a 300, 400 class, great. The Homeland Security side is a little bit more protective of their information. Search out venues where the partners will and stakeholders will come together. Regional Readiness Rendezvous is just on the top of my mind. So, you know, take advantage of that type of venue. And if you have access to learning and understanding, leadership in crisis, stress, and the consequence that stress plays on a person's physiology, communication principles and methodologies, closed loop communication, three-way communication, vetting, phonetic alphabets, primarily for the military, 24-hour clocks, all of this stuff that we would aggregate from law enforcement, from fire department, from the military. They all kind of merge together in the Homeland Security emergency management world, and a lot of pieces are taken. So my advice, be a generalist, develop a database of knowledge, expertise, and exposure that will provide you an opportunity to recall in the time of an interview, in the time of assisting with a drill or an exercise, and even that will assist you in conversations with somebody who's in the world, who lives it day to day. Really, that's all I've got, Lori. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. You know, we really appreciate your time and your expertise and sharing some of your really diverse background with us. And thanks for fielding the questions from our students and team. So, and thank you to everybody who joined us. So on behalf of Idaho State University and the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Program, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Mike, and thank you to everybody else who chimed in.
Did you say we could have your contact information? I didn't want to let you off the hook super easy.
Yeah. Was it part of the invitation, Lori? I saw it on the invitation, but it may not be. I can flash it up on the screen.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and put it in the chat window if you'd like, and that way folks can grab onto that, and I can if anybody who hears this later and would like to have Mike's contact information, go ahead and send me an email and I'll connect you.
Thanks, guys.
So that's my email.
Okay.
Feel free to reach out. Understand that I may be slow in responding. I will do my best to respond.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.